Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 24th of August 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, we're delighted to say that it's a wonderful day outside. So the mood has been lifted here in the UK Column studio, and we're ready to get into some
dark subjects.
It's always the same if we're reporting what's happening politically in UK. And can we say we're very keen for people to probably get a little bit of focus back on our favourite political charity, Common Purpose, because Common Purpose is still highly involved in manipulating the political scene, not only in UK, of course. Scotland, we've been hearing about the works of Common Purpose, but as Mike is about to cover, worldwide.
Well, we mentioned this yesterday, that they're running their ASEAN Leaders course at the moment, the second part of that. Today they are visiting this school, the Sampurna Academy. So let's have a look at their website. Here we go. It fills me with warm feeling there. This is all about preparing your child for success with STEAM, leadership, and social responsibility skills. So they are teaching technology, engineering, maths, art, and this kind of stuff, but they are particularly focusing on leadership and social responsibility skills from the youngest age. So this runs from kindergarten right up to university level, and they're all about character development. The future leaders of Indonesia, they say, need a well-rounded education, one that develops a strong academic foundation, but also moral character and the ability to engage with problems critically. Also to have the knowledge, empathy, and ability to bridge the cultural divides. I think that's cultural intelligence, as Common Purpose likes to call it, that exists, but across a more interconnected world. In order for our future leaders to be able to affect change in their local communities, the nation, and global environments, we encourage and facilitate opportunities for our students to work with local communities, exposing them to real issues and societal debates from an early age. Our teachers and mentors consistently engage students and parents at an individual level to help them inculcate the values of leadership, entrepreneurship, and social responsibility. And just before we leave this, I thought we'd highlight the Academy's logo, and I'm just going to say it's there are clearly close connections there. They seem to be coming from about the same place.
Clearly well aligned. I did pick up on a couple of things you mentioned there, Mike, because you've got common purpose and moral character in the same piece of text, which
oxymoron
must be. Moral character, Common Purpose as an organisation has done nothing to answer all the questions about its control over people with budgets inside local authorities, training of school children without any CRB checks, and engaging parents. That brought a smile to my face because, of course, when Common Purpose was highly active amongst schools and colleges in UK, very few parents knew what the Common Purpose agenda was. Now we can see that same agenda being taken into schools overseas, and I will say probably very naive, good but naive people now picking up, well, we need to get involved with Common Purpose. Well, it's outrageous.
It may be, Brian, that there's some people, as I was reading that, are saying, well, that doesn't sound too bad. Now, of course, Common Purpose has been at work in this country for, 20 years, 30 years? If you want to get some background on this, if you go onto the UK Column website, there's a series of articles on there called the Common Purpose Effect. And what we're really doing is documenting the effect that Common Purpose has had on society, and particularly in the public sector, over the time that they've been active in this country. They're now spreading out across the world, and we can expect to see the same types of results in other countries.
Breakdown and confusion. And of course, one of the places that Common Purpose boasted that it had become active in was Libya. And Common Purpose said that it was going to be retraining the Libyan civil service to help the country re-establish itself. Where had the money come for that training? That had come from the European Union. And if I'm correct, Mike, I think that was why while Sarkozy was still in power, So we've got common purpose, we've got a highly pro-European Union agenda, and of course it's choosing these future leaders who seem to be more and more powerful and more detached from any sort of democracy underneath them.
So the
Sarkozy being the man.
Yes, so the question is, will Nicolas Sarkozy become a future leader once again? He has decided to become a candidate for the presidential election in 2017 in France. And this is a comment from him. He said, in the face of so much defiance towards public life, I want to convince the French that the debate of a campaign is fully part of the presidential mandate. And he's saying France demands that we give it everything. I'm not quite sure what it is.
No. Is he saying he's a little bit loopy here? I look at this picture, Mike, and forgive me, Sarkozy, I have a little problem.
Well, he's clearly hoping to do a Berlusconi and keep coming back, but or maybe a Putin for that matter. But anyway, we shall see what happens in the 2017 election. It would not be a great thing, I think.
Not at all. But if we've got the great leaders coming back in France, then we've got this Mail article showing us that Lord Hague, as he is now, is going to be up to some very dirty dealings by acting through a consultancy. What is he going to be doing? Well, he's going to be advising vast global companies. We've got HSBC mentioned there, Coca-Cola, Nissan, for example. He's going to be advising them, obviously, on how they can squirm, turn and block, stall, obfuscate anything to do with Brexit. So he's not able to practice right at the moment because he's still got some limitations on him as a result of his parliamentary positions. But you hop straight out of Westminster, straight over to global corporatist organisation, and then he's going to essentially be helping them to block what the democratic voters said, which is we want to be out of the European Union as soon as possible. So I'm just going to bring in here for Brexit advisor Reed Treason, and we're going to see a bit more of that a little bit later. But if William Hague is one of our illustrious MPs, we've now got something extremely interesting taking place because we've got a blur between soap operas and Westminster. So let's bring in this, and the picture itself is interesting because if you go to the Mail, and I encourage you to go and read this story online, you'll see that this is a totally constructed picture. But what's the headline? Ex-Coronation Street star Tracy Brabin is nailed on to take over Jo Cox's common seat. And Brabin is apparently seen as a perfect replacement as she shares Cox's personality. I found this particularly creepy, Mike, because what we've got here is a blurring now between soap operas and Westminster. Reality is beginning to fade into the background. And what is the sharing of personality? Well, they describe that as she's bubbly, active and energetic. I would have thought the question is, does she actually have a brain which would allow her to make the decisions we need to be taken in Westminster to start to sort this country out? Let's have a look at how this really looks, because for the older members of our viewers and listeners, we've got the famous Coronation Street here. Is this a scene out of Westminster now?
We should mention for our American listeners in particular that Coronation Street is a long-standing British soap opera. Long-standing,
which started out quite light-hearted and became horrifically dark to be overtaken in darkness by EastEnders soap, of course. But this is what they say. She's obviously the woman for Parliament. Miss Brabin has appeared in a number of TV shows, includes starring as the clumsy waitress Sandra alongside David Jason in A Bit of a Do, Roxy Drake in EastEnders, and the ghost hunter in BBC's Miss Oliver. So this is just the sort of person we need for Westminster. Well, no, I think what's going on here is that there's something very interesting unfolding in the media, Mike, and this is a psychological attack because some people are not going to be able to differentiate whether they're actually seeing a proper politician or it's an actor or somewhere in between.
Well, you could say the Commons is a soap opera, perhaps. That's maybe where they're taking it.
We could.
Right. Now, Brexit, EU referendum. We called it a psyop for a couple of different reasons, and we got criticised from certain people for doing that. But nonetheless, what were the reasons? Well, first of all, because we don't believe that we're leaving the European Union. We still don't believe that. We'll come on to that in a little bit more in a second. But the other reason was because we believed that Brexit was going to be used to drive through various policy, and we've been highlighting over the last 2-3 years, in particular, the constitutional reform agenda. That hasn't stopped, and in fact, it's moving forward apace. So here we have Bernard Jenkins, MP, and he was speaking to the Public Finance magazine, and he was, of course, a member of the board for Vote Leave, and he is now absolutely using Brexit as a driver for constitutional reform. He's demanding a new conversation on the British Constitution. He's worried that the major effect of leaving the European Union would be freeing up policy areas that are currently under the remit of the European Union. So what he's saying here is this is a really big constitutional question. To what extent are Whitehall and Westminster going to automatically delegate things like fishing and agriculture and environment and planning? And what, of course, he's talking about is the devolution agenda. He goes on to say there is a big, interesting question about how leaving the European Union actually involves all the constituent parts of the United Kingdom and, in England, local government. So he's absolutely on the money for the devolution of powers that come back from the European Union that really should be the remit of Westminster, but will be devolved out to the city regions which they're busy creating. This is a part and parcel of really the central core of what we've been talking about for a long time, which is the redefinition, from a constitutional point of view, that is, the redefinition of the relationship between us as individuals and governments, corporations, and where the terms and conditions all lie. It's becoming a pretty dark place, but what they're doing is completely destroying the constitutional foundations of this country, and people have got to start to understand what those foundations are, what they represent, and what the implications of that destruction are going to be.
Yeah, and perhaps we could remind people, going back to the days when we had the government offices of the regions, which of course were brought in without any full Westminster explanation and debate. So those so-called government bodies for the regions were designed to help create the idea of regions in the public mind. And then they were supported by the development agencies, such as the South West of England development agencies, given huge amounts of money in order to give them power in those respective regions. So the development agencies behind mainly very non-productive developments, huge amounts of money disappeared, frittered away. But what it did is create the agenda for these regions. This has now moved on to the city-state. So we've got massive constitutional change simply not discussed in Parliament, not explained in the press and the media. It creeps along under the surface.
Yeah. In the meantime, while Jeremy Corbyn's messing about on trains, Owen Smith, who of course is running against him for the leadership of the Labour Party, is busy calling for a second referendum on the European Union and our position within it. And of course, well, aside from the fact that this is pretty predictable, and remains to be seen whether he becomes the Labour leader, probably not, despite Corbyn's best efforts. Nonetheless, the question is, does he even have the right to ask to suggest this? Because it's a bit unclear. Article 50, nobody really knows quite how that's going to work out. But the question is that when it's invoked, there doesn't seem to be any suggestion anywhere, and certainly the noise from the European Union itself is that once that is invoked, it is you can't return from it. So basically what Owen Smith is saying is that there would have to be, once the negotiation is done, Article 50 gets invoked, a negotiation begins about the terms and conditions for us leaving the European Union. That would then, he says, have to be put to a referendum. But by that point, what he doesn't seem to grasp is that it's already too late, because there would be no way back from that, other than for Britain to complete the process of leaving and then to ask to rejoin again. And maybe that's what he's aiming for.
Well, I don't know, but as we've got some comments coming up at the moment in our chat box, and people are saying that basically this is just heading towards you need to vote again to get the right result, which of course we've seen.
We've seen many times before from the EU, indeed, absolutely. Okay, now moving on, and pretty much in line with what Bernard Jenkins was saying here. This is a press release today from the Home Office regarding, well, it was quite an interesting title. The title of the press release discussed government fire procurement, and it did. I did sort of have a slight double take with that because I didn't realise that the government procured fires for the fire service. But anyway, there you go. This is all about procurement of equipment for the fire service in the UK. And what they're saying is that they've published the first ever national overview of what each fire and rescue authority in England pays for 25 common items of uniform and equipment. And they are, of course, suggesting that the fact that these 45 authorities are buying this equipment individually is not the best use of public money, which is a bit ironic because last night, actually, there was an episode of Yes Minister on the television where Jim Hacker was in front of the select committee who were quizzing him about the fact that everything was being purchased centrally and how that was an inefficient use of government money. Of course, Yes Minister is a sitcom, but nonetheless, it was quite satirical, quite to the point at the time. So what is actually going on here? Well, Brandon Lewis MP, who's the minister in charge of this, gives us a clue. He says, while some fire and rescue authorities are already collaborating on procurement and reaping the benefits, there's still a lot more to be done. And this is part and parcel of the change, the governance change that's going on in this country at the moment. We've already seen Police Scotland, the various police authorities in Scotland being merged into one Police Scotland. We're starting to see police regions being showing more collaboration and clearly with a view to being merged into one Uber authority.
Regional authorities first, I think.
Absolutely. But what's the first area that you need to merge, of course, is finance, and that's exactly what's going on here, I believe.
Yeah, to control them. Well, Mr. Lewis, very outspoken on matters to do with fire, but we just remind viewers and listeners that this is the same Mr. Lewis who's now 26 days of silence, having been asked to comment on the Metropolitan Police Officer whistleblowing on the major cover-up of child abuse in London with the collaboration of members of Parliament, local authorities, charities and other individuals. He doesn't want to talk about that matter at all. We've spoken to the Home Office media team this morning because the Home Office has still not replied to a request for simply their response to that testimony from the Metropolitan Police Officer. So children dead in the gutter, children topped up with disease, children trafficked, groomed, abused, drugged. Mr. Lewis, not interested, but when it comes to procuring new fire equipment, he gets very excited indeed. Why would there be this huge difference in his approach? I'm going to say once again that the answer is, of course, that Westminster is heavily involved in the abuse of children. They know it. We know there are groups of MPs who are so frightened of the subject, they won't talk about it. They're not involved in it, but they know that there's something extremely dark operating in Westminster. The child abuse is the means by which our politicians are blackmailed to do the bidding of the global banks and the global corporations. Well, what can our politicians do? This gets pretty close to the mark here. A good article from the Mail by a gentleman called Alex Brummer. And what is he doing? He's talking about the fact that the China National Offshore Oil Corporation has buried its way into North Sea oil. And he's saying that it's estimated that company is now responsible for extraction of up to 200,000 barrels a day, 10% of the output roughly. And that means basically that the Communist Party in Beijing has become the largest crude oil operator in the North Sea. So we can relax, of course. We've got EastEnders in Parliament, and the message from Theresa May's Conservative government is that communism is good. So I think we know what's coming, Mike, pretty quickly, unless the public stand up to be counted. And then we better bring in these two. This is from the same article. Of course, Cameron technically faded into the background, but we can be sure he's up to no good. And the comment was that the Cameron-Osborne government was enthusiastic to the point of recklessness in its open door policy to Chinese foreign investment in the UK. Well, we're going to say for recklessness, read treason, because this is exactly what it is. We're not just giving away public buildings, Mike, which you've been highlighting for some months. We can now see that anything Britain owns is open to foreign governments, hostile governments, communist governments, and it's certainly open to criminal international banking cartels. Well, The Guardian had picked up on this a few hours ago. We thought we'd bring that in since it seems to be part of the subject. Scotland's North Sea oil revenues collapse. So they've got a graph here showing the extent of that collapse. But there was a tweet embedded in the article, and it said here that Scotland's deficit, almost 15 billion as North Sea oil revenues fall. Scotland's share of North Sea of oil revenues has fallen 97% in the past financial year. Well, that's a pretty major fall if that figure is correct. But of course, what they're saying is that North Sea oil reserves limited. We've heard that before in other locations. I think oil's becoming ever more difficult to extract in the North Sea, plus the world price of oil has fallen. So Scotland under pressure from revenues more limited, but not to worry, because of course we're giving huge chunks of that revenue away to communist China. But according to Westminster, communism is now good. It's pretty easy to understand what's happening, I think, Mike, overall.
Yes, well, let's move on to financial matters. UBS, Deutsche Bank, Santander, and well, this is going out live, so I've completely forgotten the fourth one, and I do apologise off the top of my head. They are now creating a new digital currency. This is shouldn't really be any surprise to many people, but this is going to be, as we've been suggesting, is going to be based on the blockchain technology, this distributed database technology that is behind Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So this is four of the world's biggest banks. UBS is pioneering what they're calling a utility settlement coin. Oh yes, it's BNY Mellon is the fourth one. I do apologize. They're saying that today trading between banks and institutions is difficult, time-consuming, and costly, which is why we all have big back offices. This is about streamlining it and making it more efficient. So this isn't about providing a digital currency for retail, for use in the high street, so to speak. This is about them transferring money between themselves and settling accounts via a digital currency based on the same type of technology as Bitcoin. Now, there's several cash systems being developed for this. There's one called Settle, which is a group which is funded by various hedge funds. Citigroup is creating one called Citicoin. Goldman Sachs is creating one called Settlecoin. And JP Morgan is apparently working on a similar project. And of course, we shouldn't forget that Mark Carney has been talking about this same technology for central banking as well over the last year or so in particular. So I think the Federal Reserve Bank, the Bank of England, and the Bank of Canada are all discussing this. So they're clearly beginning the digital rollout with their back office function to begin with. And then eventually, as we start to see fewer and fewer places accepting cash on the high street, we might see that being rolled out eventually there too.
So criminal cartels building their own cashless world system.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, don't worry about that, because there is good news, because at least one of the major banks has been having a good look at its operations. So here we are. It's where are we? Lloyds Bank, and it says, according to the Mail anyway, that embarrassed Lloyds boss, here he is, Antonio Horta Osorio, has apologised to his £75,000 staff after being caught having an affair on a business trip. So this naughty banker, you read the article, there's still alleged in there, so we better say alleged to have been sharing a bed with a lady while he was overseas. And this is so outrageous that he's had to apologise. But Lloyds have insisted that no rules were broken, said the chief executive paid personal costs out of his own pocket. So never mind about all the stuff going on with money laundering between the international banks, a little bit of drug money moving in and out. Don't worry about that. We're just pleased to tell you that Lloyds has taken some pretty severe action at that very naughty executive for a little bit of nookie on the side. We're just saying a masterpiece of reporting by the Daily Mail. So affairs are bad, but banking fraud is okay, really. Well, let's stay on the subject of money and bring in the Church of England. Russia Today actually picking up on a Telegraph story here, but we like the photo. So here's Russia Today. Church of England bishops told not to apologise to sex abuse victims. Now, this is a very, very interesting story because we are starting to get to the heart of what's going on, the scale of the abuse of children. Remember my comment from a few moments ago that the significance of the abuse of children is that it is the blackmail system to control British politicians and indeed many overseas politicians. And the church, of course, has been a hotbed of the abuse of children. So let's bring Archbishop Welby on screen, because this man has been challenged repeatedly over the past few weeks about child abuse. He doesn't want to talk about it. But this is what the Church of England was actually saying. This was in the report that the Mail the Telegraph has discovered. Because of the possibility that statements of regret might have the unintended effect of accepting legal liability for the abuse, it's important that they are approved in advance by lawyers as well as diocesan communications officers and, if relevant, insurers. So this was an internal ruling inside the Church of England that they weren't going to go near any form of apology or even actually talking to some of the abuse victims, because the moment they did that, they could be accepting liability, and the insurers simply didn't want to pay out the money. So never mind principles of Christianity, don't worry about moral codes. The Church of England simply controlled by the insurers. Well, the story got quite deep. This is actually the front page on the left of the header for the article on the Telegraph. Church of England warned bishops not to apologise too fully to sex abuse victims. And in the report, the Bishop of Durham, he's shown pictured there in front of presumably some before them fallen angel, I think it is, the angel of the north. He was then the church's head of safeguarding, and there was a victim called Joe who came forward. The church refused to deal with this man at all, following advice from the insurers. So the church simply refused to talk to somebody who had suffered horrific abuse because of the insurers. But don't worry, because the church has now said that Bishop Sarah Mullally has she's apologised, so it's all right now, Mike, apparently.
How long ago was it that we first said that insurance companies were running the child abuse
a little while ago. I'm going to bring that up on screen because that seemed to be exactly the right place to go. Now, we got some information which was sent through to us about how the church runs its insurance, and I thought this would be very good material for the public to know. So the first company is DAS, and here's their guide to legal expenses insurance. And it says DAS are the largest legal expenses insurance provider in the UK. They're proud to have pioneered the introduction of legal expenses insurance and have been protecting individuals and businesses for over 40 years. We're part of a global insurance group. So these are very powerful people, and they don't want to pay out money for the abuse of children. But they're also tied in with this organisation. This is another specialist insurance called Ecclesiastical. And here they're actually saying that they will indemnify if it's found to be legally liable for a bodily injury or illness to a person as a result of abuse. This is the church in this case. There'll be no cover for the perpetrator of an incident of abuse. It's important that you create within the guidelines of the Church of England. It's important that you operate within the guidelines of the Church of England. Failure to do so may prejudice your insurance in the event of a claim. So here are the controls coming in. And then if we just show the bit at the bottom, your legal expenses insurance provides for legal costs associated with defending criminal prosecutions. Expenses insurance manages these claims on our behalf, etc., etc. So here are insurance companies. They're not interested in exposing child abuse. Their overall agenda is to cover it up. And we've now got the situation where the Church of England, we could also say probably the Catholic Church as well, certainly doesn't want this to come to the surface. And we'll show you why in a minute.
How much money does the Church of England have sitting in investments and property and bank accounts?
Billions, Mike.
And they're worried about insurance in this case? They've surely got a duty of care to people that were abused under their care.
Well, they don't seem to be care about abuse at all. But the point's absolutely right. We're talking immensely wealthy organisations. They don't want to pay out any compensation. Well, let's go back. This is a BBC report, which was accurate. This was talking about abuse in North Wales, and the headline was Insurers advised against publication of child abuse reports. So the insurers in this particular case suggested that the chair of the Council's Social Services Committee, that's Mr. Malcolm King, a brave and determined whistleblower, should be sacked if he spoke out. So here were the insurers. What were they doing? They were interfering with evidence, really, from this gentleman. And their recommendation to the council was, well, you need to think carefully because we prefer it if he was sacked. And the insurers actually wrote this, draconian as it may seem. You may have to consider with the elected members whether they wish to remove Malcolm King from office if he insists on having the freedom to speak. So this is in-your-face manipulation to make sure that criminal abuse of children is covered up. Who is the driving force? Insurers. Who controls the insurance industry? The banking industry, I would think, Mike. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's bring in the article Mike's alluded to. Here it is. This was UK column, Child Abuse, the End for Big Insurers. And this is part of our comment in the article. In 1994, the Local Government Chronicle suggested that following a scheme of arrangement in the hands of receivers might be a better term, Municipal, which is the company implicated in the BBC article I've just mentioned, Municipal faced future claims of 925 million compared with assets of 45 million. So the insurers of that local authority who were saying, whoa, we don't want to pay out to children. Why were they doing this? Because they were bankrupt. Mm-hmm. And a bit more of our article, which we'd encourage you to read, is this: recognising that a £10,000 payment for horrific abuse and a lifetime of suffering is a gross insult, and using our own suggestion that £1 million is perhaps a more reasonable figure, 500 child abuse survivors equate to 0.5 billion. Consider Mr. King's assessment of a UK-wide child abuse gulag. The figure becomes vast. 5,000 children equates to a claim of 5 billion. And of course, if we take 5,000 children a year, which is probably somewhere in the right bracket, over many years, we're easily looking at 50,000 children. And so there is an amount of 50 billion hanging over the insurers. And this is the reason, of course, that they don't want to pay out. Right, how does this affect abuse victims? Well, Mike highlighted Teresa Cooper a few days ago, or a couple of weeks ago it was now. We would encourage people to buy Teresa's book, Trust No One, because she talks about what happened to girls in the Church of England, Kendal House, where she and other girls were drugged unconscious and abused. And of course, what happened when Teresa took her case to the Church of England, they used their legal teams backed by the insurers to make sure that she wasn't going to get any compensation. And my goodness, this lady has really had to fight her case through. What has the Church of England done? Well, we've apologised. Same as Joe. We've got lots of money, but we prefer to use it fighting you. So we're going to say they only apologised after years of denial, harassment of the survivors, and millions which were spent in defensive legal actions. So there we have it. This is the state of the nation at the moment. Westminster has become a soap opera, and the Church of England would rather sit on its wealth and make sure that those who've been abused stay in their nasty little holes. It's pretty unpleasant, Mike, isn't it?
Yes. Well, last week, complete change of subject. Last week we mentioned this article that the US is moving its tactical nuclear weapons from Turkey to Romania amid fears ISIS could snatch them. And this was the propaganda that was being pushed out following a report from a think tank in the United States warning that non-state actors could get access to nuclear material. Not sure whether this is a response to the US's slightly changing relationship with Turkey. But anyway, we did mention that on Friday, I think, last week. Well, now Matthew Rycroft, who is the ambassador to the permanent representative to the United Nations for the UK, has just given a speech on this very subject. So he is pushing the fear agenda here. He's saying the threat of toxic, poisonous, or nuclear materials falling into the hands of non-state actors, particularly terrorists, is top priority that requires closest cooperation between all member states, as well as civil society and industry. I'm not quite clear what charity, civil society, and industry has to do with nuclear material, Brian.
Well, maybe he actually knows that in the dirty agenda of international crime, organised crime, these materials are moving through all sorts of organisations.
Quite possibly. So if we just put him back on for a second, Theo, he went on to discuss Resolution 1540, and this, he's saying, is not a household name. This is a United Nations resolution which they say affirms that the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons and their means of delivery constitute a threat to international peace and security, and therefore we've got to refrain from supporting by any means non-state actors from developing, acquiring, manufacturing, possessing, transporting, transferring, or using nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons and their delivery systems. Of course, he couldn't finish his speech without mentioning Syria and having a dig at Assad, because although Resolution 1540, which is what his speech was really about, is about non-state actors having access to chemical weapons and nuclear weapons in some form, he had to bring in Assad and reiterate the allegation that Assad has been using chemical weapons against the Syrian people. So, you can't let any opportunity go to waste. But nonetheless, pushing the fear of jihadists getting access to dirty bombs, I suppose.
Yeah, we must stay as frightened as possible, but probably we should be frightened of our own government before the jihadists.
Yes. Now, it's not often that I see an article in the Huffington Post that I like, but I thought I'd highlight this one. We know about the lies over Iraq, but what about Syria? And this is from Mark Curtis, who's described as a British historian and journalist. He's been working on, he's written many books on foreign policy of the United Kingdom and the United States, particularly from the post the Second World War. And he starts this article by saying, British wars abroad have two enemies. First, the official enemy, portrayed as a monster whom we always battle with noble intentions. But second is the enemy within, us, the public. The danger posed by the public is that we may stop elites doing what they want. Hence, we are the subject of state information operations to convey messages and obscure facts, usually via compliant media organisations. The British government, he accuses the British government of waging information warfare by funding media operations for some Syrian rebel groups, for example. He goes on to list some examples. Ministry of Defence hiring contractors to produce video, photos, radio broadcasts, and social media posts branded with the logos of rebel groups, read terrorists, to effectively, quotes, effectively run a press office for opposition fighters. He accuses the government of simply lying to Parliament and public. He says that another issue is whether Britain has been supplying arms to the Syrian opposition, and he goes on to give examples that we have. And he then says, should we take seriously the government claim that it wants to see an end to the war brokered by the UN in Syria? Britain's policy in Syria, by stepping up support to opposition forces, is having the effect of prolonging the war. It strongly appears as if Britain wants neither side to win or lose. And of course, he's absolutely right about that. Britain does not want either side to win or lose. This is about arms sales. It's about divide and conquer. It's about controlling a region. And this is something that Britain has been historically extremely good at. It's about gangs and counter-gangs. And if you still haven't read the book by General Frank Kitson, then get hold of it and read it. And perhaps some of this will make a bit more sense.
Gangs and counter-gangs.
Gangs and counter-gangs, yeah. Okay, finally then, Russia. Everybody wants Russia. It seems this is there's been some talk in the media over the last few days since Russia was using Iran as a base of operations for bombing in Syria. The Iranians, really some people within Iran, were pretty upset that that was made public. Nonetheless, Iran has now made an official statement on this, and so they have officially acknowledged that they invited Russia to launch their operations from their airbase in Iran, and so that's perhaps they've been forced into making that acknowledgement that following. I think they were a little embarrassed that had been made public in the first place. But of course, it's not just Iran that's inviting Russia into their territory. Yemen desperately trying to persuade Russia to come and help in that country as well.
Yeah.
So everybody seems to want Russia at the moment, Brian.
Well, I don't think I'm surprised in the slightest. I'll just say, interesting, that last slide, perhaps Theo, just pop it back again. I just look at the gentleman standing there and I'm thinking to myself, he looks smart. He's smartly dressed. I compare that to what I see in Westminster at the moment. Just a small point, or maybe not. Okay, well, that brings it to the end of today's news. I'd just like to say we will get a picture in due course, but we've got some new UK column pens here, black with a very simple logo on, which I think is very attractive. Remind me of prices, Mike, £3.50. Yeah. £3.50. Has got a soft stylus at the end for jabbing at your tablet or whatever it is. So if you haven't got a UK column pen and would like one, please have a look at the website. And also, several people have asked me for the contact details for the gentleman I mentioned yesterday, Graham Duckworth, who is in HMP Cardiff prison. I will get the details for his contact address up on screen. I'll tweet it out initially, as that's an easy way of doing it. But we will give you more detail on that case. The tragic death of his brother, the authorities are trying to say it was a suicide. We don't think so. But what has happened to Graham as a result of fighting for truth is extraordinary. We'll also like to remind our audience that Melanie Shaw is out of contact at the moment. Basically, the court appointed a legal team. That legal team has now put a barrier around Melanie. We can't get in to see her. She's not receiving mail properly. Mail, she writes, is cynically returned to her a few days later. This is very, very nasty psychological stuff. So Melanie Shaw is being held in prison and they are working extremely hard now to get her sectioned. Why is this? Well, we say it's not only her general knowledge over the abuse of children at Beechwood, but it's due to the fact that she has said quite openly that senior British politicians were also involved in the abuse of children and the trafficking of children. So these are serious times, Mike, and as we've already said, the Home Office at the moment simply will not talk about the evidence of that Metropolitan Police whistleblower, and the Home Office will also not talk about the Doherty case, where those 4 children have been taken away as a result of the parents trying to expose what appears to be paedophile activity north of the border. So if you're thinking, we've got a few problems in Westminster, no, we've got major problems with criminal activity inside the British government. And of course, the wall of silence says they dare not comment on these subjects. So it's up to us to dig out the truth. If you're helping by researching, thank you very much. And I'll say to the people who've asked if they can help recently, yes, please. And do get in contact with us if you like more detail on where we'd like you to be looking at the moment. That's it for today. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Will we have a guest tomorrow, Mike?
Mark Anderson.
Mark Anderson from American Free Press. Thanks very much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.